and welcome to the Confusion to Clarity podcast. This podcast is for anybody who needs that reminder that they really are capable of achieving amazing things. Each week, we will be diving deep into all things mindset, manifestation, and spirituality. Hosted by me, Natalie, a clinical hypnotherapist, psychotherapist, coach, mum, and lover of all things mindset and manifestation. When listening, I want to give you a break from reality. I'm going to share with you the tools and techniques that you need to make your goals reality so you can stop playing small. Hello and welcome back to the Confusion to Clarity podcast. I hope you are all well and have had an amazing week. Although, letting you into a little secret, it's not been a week since I recorded the previous episode. I actually recorded that yesterday, but I'm taking the week off. So the week that this episode goes out, I have booked the week off. If you have your own business, you understand that you just don't switch off from work. It's literally 7 days a week. So I thought to myself, how can I really make sure that I can detach and be present while I'm away? So I thought I need to be organized. I need to be extra organized, which isn't a quality I always embody naturally. So I thought I'm going to get this episode pre-recorded, uploaded, scheduled, because one of my commitments or promises to myself this year was to record an episode every single week. So I'm upholding that promise to myself by being organised. But it's these thoughts, the going away, that actually prompted me to create today's episode, which is talking about the anxiety, the overwhelm, the mental load that women carry before a holiday. Now, this time of year, I see an increase in women coming to me who feel anxious around traveling. So that could be overwhelm in the process up to a holiday. It could be travel anxiety in general, the being away from home, the disruption to routines. And it can also be a fear of flying, which is one of the most common phobias that I support with all year round, but it definitely peaks in the summer months. And I think I've shared on here before, I actually used hypnosis in my training to work on and cure my fear of flying. So it's super effective. So have you ever noticed that by the time you're actually ready to leave for your holiday, you already feel like you need a holiday? Now, I know for most of us that is probably true anyway, just because we're so busy. But what I mean specifically is when we go on holiday, there are so many extra things to think about before you even step foot out of the door that you just feel mentally overloaded, overwhelmed, and totally exhausted. And with holidays, you've probably been looking forward to it for months. Perhaps you really, really do need that break from the school runs, the washing, the cooking, the never-ending list of things that require your attention. But as the holiday gets closer, you notice that excitement, the anticipation becomes buried underneath the planning, the shopping, the packing, and the responsibility of making sure that everybody else has everything that they need. So, first of all, we've got the overwhelm of actually booking the holiday, which could be a separate episode in its own right. That in itself is hugely overwhelming. Where are we going to go? What dates are we going to go? If you've got pets, do they have space to have the dogs? Does that fit in with the flights? Are the kids going to miss school? What budget are we working from? So that's a whole thing in itself. But we're going to jump forward a bit and take this from the point where the booking side is done, but it's the overwhelm from booking to getting on that plane. Because in your head, you are checking everything. You're looking at passports. I don't know about you, but I always do this, double check the passport so many times, even before we've even gone, just checking the dates. I think that comes from working for an airline for 15 years and regularly having calls and seeing people who are due to fly the next day and have suddenly discovered their passport is out of date, which is biggest fear. So I go and check the dates. Consciously, I know that date can't change. It's printed, but I will go back and check. And as I've said before, I'm not exempt from feelings of overwhelm and anxiety, and definitely my peaks around travel, although I'm better with flying. Maybe you're looking on the airline's website checking for baggage allowance, or maybe you're taking just hand baggage and you're thinking, how can we cram everything into one bag? You're looking at travel insurance, you're buying clothes because somebody has suddenly outgrown everything. They've had a massive growth spurt and their summer clothes from last year don't fit. You're working out the transfers. As I touched on a second ago, you're arranging the pets, which is a really big thing when you're going away. who's going to have them, how long do they need to be there for, extra food for them, do I need to do anything else for them before they go. You're downloading boarding passes, you're then buying all the extra holiday medication, which is a whole other expense as well, isn't it? I don't know if everybody else does this, but I'm like, well, I'll get this, and literally take my own pharmacy with me, have something for every occasion. I'm not known for traveling light. Adapters, snacks for the journey. Adapters, this time, just by chance, I thought, I don't know, maybe even think about it where I'm going. I had adapters and I thought, I wonder if they are the same ones they use there. So I checked, and no, they weren't, which is bloody lucky I checked. But of course they're not. Of course they're different adapters. And I had to order specific adapters for the place I'm visiting. So I've got them. And then I was like, well, how many do I need? Because obviously everybody has a gazillion devices nowadays. Anyway, I got off topic there and away from my notes, which is why I have notes. So these podcasts would literally last for an hour. So really our brains are so full trying to remember all the extra things that nobody else appears to have thought of. And then somebody, we're not going to name names, will casually ask, oh, what time are we leaving for the airport? Or where's my passport? Or have you packed a charger? Or perhaps, why are you so stressed? We're going on holiday. And you think, just a busy mind. But you think internally, yes, we're going on holiday. But it feels as though I am the only person responsible for getting the entire family there. Like, I am travel agent, coordinator extraordinaire. And recently, a client session made me think about travel anxiety and the different reasons somebody might feel anxious about going away. And as I touched on at the start, it's not just necessarily the flying. Sometimes there can be a specific fear around the flying itself or being at an airport that can be quite triggering for a lot of people. It can be unfamiliar places, separation, or just being away from your own home. But for many women, particularly mums, it's not just the journey that feels difficult. It's the travel overwhelm. It's the whole process before you even bloom and leave. It's the mental load of carrying the entire holiday around in your head before you've even stepped a flip-flop outside the door. Because the holiday doesn't begin when you arrive at the airport. If you're the woman, mum, overloaded person, you know that this has been going on in your head for weeks, possibly even months. So by the time everybody else is starting to feel excited and like, yay, we're going to the airport, you might be feeling, oh my God, I'm so drained and mentally exhausted. I'm just done. And the thing with anxiety is it can make exciting or meaningful moments feel frightening, which is one of the most frustrating things. But sometimes what feels like anxiety is also totally understandable because it's the mind has been given so much to hold. It's like the suitcase that is way over the limit, that is too heavy to lift. Your mind is full to the brim to bursting. So as I was saying in this episode, I want to talk about all the work that goes into the holiday before you've even left the house. The planning, the responsibility, the pressure, the invisible work. And I think that's the key word there, the invisible work that so many women carry. And I want to look at how you can begin to create a little bit more space for yourself without feeling as though you have to make the entire experience perfect for everybody else. And I'm going to share some tips on how you can do this. But I think one of the most important things is bringing awareness to a situation. And as I say to all my clients all of the time, when we have awareness, we can create change. Right now, you might just be doing all these things on autopilot, not noticing. So this episode is to say, okay, you're not alone. It's okay. How can we make shifts and changes? And sometimes just by even listening to this or talking about it, it can be hugely beneficial in releasing that pressure valve in your mind, letting out that steam so you can create a capacity inside, a void which you can fill in with more calmness, peace, and ultimately holiday enjoyment. So let's talk about the invisible mental load of traveling. So when people talk about holidays, they usually talk about the destination. They would talk about the hotel, the weather, the places they want to visit, the food, and the break from everyday life. But what we don't talk about enough is everything that has to happen before the family can leave the house. For many women, going away involves so much more than packing their own case. Well, we know that. You're not only completing the practical tasks, but you're remembering what needs to be remembered. That is exhausting because you're constantly thinking 3 steps ahead. You're constantly thinking, what if, what if, what if? Which is where anxiety comes from. Anxiety is about that fixating in the future, not knowing how things are going to be, planning for every eventuality that may or may not happen, which normally is really unhelpful. But we know when we're traveling, to a degree, that has to happen because we don't know necessarily what the destination is going to be like. So in this instance, it is about thinking a little bit ahead in a organized way, but it can very easily tip into the overwhelm anxiety if we're not reining those thoughts in, if we're trying to do too much, if our brain is overloaded. Because you're also going to be anticipating other people's needs and you're having to notice what hasn't been done yet. And you're often doing all of this while your ordinary life continues around you. So you're probably still working, answering messages, food shopping, dealing with bills, schools, etc. Especially this time of year, we all know that schools have even more that we have to contend with than normal. And, managing the home and the cooking and everything else, it's just a lot. And then obviously the holiday has been added to your existing mental load, and you're meant to feel happy about it. You're meant to be excited. And this is why something intended to feel exciting can feel like another enormous project that's been placed upon you, another project for you to manage. And other people might see it as a holiday, but you feel the responsibility of making it happen. And it isn't about poor organization, it's about over responsibility. Because some women might tell themselves, I just need to be more organized. But so many of the women that I work with are already incredibly organized. When you think about all the things that we're juggling on a day-to-day basis, that's a lot. Most of my clients who come to me are the people who are holding everything together. So the problem isn't that they need a better list or, to just cope better. The problem is that the whole list belongs to them in the first place. Travel overwhelm isn't about the number of tasks, it's the feeling that if you don't remember something, it won't happen. That if somebody forgets something important, you'll be expected to solve it. That if plans go wrong, everybody will turn towards you. You're not just packing the bags or checking the documents, you're monitoring, you're the tour guide, the tour operator for the whole operation. And monitoring is exhausting because your mind never receives the message that the job is finished, it's time to clock off. There is always going to be another question to answer, another arrangement, another thing that you might have missed or that you've suddenly thought about. And this is often where women start judging themselves. You feel tense, irritable, you're unable to switch off, and you think, oh, what's wrong with me? I should be excited. I'm being so ungrateful. You feel guilty. But gratitude and overwhelm can exist at the same time. And I think that's something that we don't allow ourselves to see. It's not either or, they can both be present. You can feel incredibly fortunate to be going away and still feel exhausted by everything involved in getting there. You can love your family and still feel frustrated that everybody else seems to be like little soldiers waiting for instructions. You can want the holiday and resent the fact that you have become solely responsible for creating. Like, that's okay. So one feeling doesn't cancel out the other. And sometimes your response isn't irrational. One of the concepts I talk about with my clients all the time is this concept of our stress bucket. So we don't have a bucket in our brain, it is metaphorical, but this metaphorical bucket in our brain contains all the trials and tribulations that we experience during our day, and it builds up and builds up. We empty that stress bucket when we go to sleep at night. So when we are asleep, when we're dreaming, when we're going through our REM cycles, our rapid eye movement, we are clearing out that stress bucket. We're emptying it out, making sense of things, storing core memories, clearing away things that don't need to be there. So in the morning when we wake up, our stress bucket should have emptied and we're ready to tackle the next day. But the problem is, our lives are so busy, add in holidays, that stress bucket gets so full. And then what we find is when we go to sleep, our brain just doesn't have the capacity to empty out that stress bucket fully, because when we are dreaming, when we're going through our REM cycles, it's really enervating. We can actually only go through up to 5 cycles per night. So if there is a lot in your stress bucket, you can't clear it out. When you wake up the next morning, there's still a residual amount in there. The next day is as busy as the previous, more things go into that stress bucket. But what happens, like any physical bucket, it can only can contain a certain amount of liquid capacity, whatever you want to call it, before it overflows. It's the same in your mind. That stress bucket has reached its limit, it's reached the capacity, and it overflows. And when that stress bucket overflows, that's when you're going to notice you're really irritable, you might get really angry, you might start crying, you might feel flat, or it could start affecting you physically, feeling physically stressed. It can affect your sleep, waking up in the middle of the night, struggling to get to sleep, waking up feeling exhausted. So when you understand that concept and then you add in a holiday, it can really be something that very, very quickly fills up that stress bucket. So it's not that you're being irrational, it's just that your mind is so full, that bucket is overloaded, it's spilling over. There is genuinely a lot to do, and you may be carrying more than your fair share. Perhaps you asked somebody else to arrange one part of the trip, but you still had to remind them. Then you had to explain what needed doing, and then you had to ask whether had it been done. And then you checked the confirmation yourself because you weren't completely sure. That doesn't make you a control freak. It makes you somebody who has probably learnt in the past, I've got to be hyper vigilant, and it's now become an ingrained response. Even if the other person has carried out that task, if you're still checking or reminding, you're carrying the mental responsibility. Again, it's going into your stress bucket. And this is the difference between somebody helping you and somebody taking ownership. When somebody helps you, the job still belongs to you. You are still the project manager because you've identified the task, you've delegated the task, you've reminded them of the task, you've probably supervised the task, and then you've double checked the task. So when somebody takes ownership of the whole task, they are the ones remembering, they are the ones researching, they are the ones completing it. They deal with any questions or consequences, and they just come to you with the, oh, this has happened, maybe giving you a choice or just keeping you updated, as opposed to putting the problem back onto you. When somebody else takes ownership, it's delegated from your mind and passed over to them. You're not carrying it round on your mental to-do list, the clipboard in your head, because this is genuinely what sharing the load looks like. And without shared ownership, telling yourself to just calm down probably isn't going to address the problem. It's probably going to make you feel worse. You can't breathe your way out of an unfair amount of responsibility. You can regulate your nervous system, which is obviously so important in this instance. Side note, I'll link below the 2 episodes on nervous system regulation, because if you're feeling overwhelmed about a holiday, I would definitely recommend going to listen to those episodes as well. But it's really important to acknowledge first and foremost what your nervous system is responding to. And I know with delegation or, sharing that ownership, there might be some people listening to this that go, yeah, well, I've tried that and, it doesn't work, because I'll say to them, well, you plan this element of the trip and then they don't. And I always end up doing it. And then I've learned now if I don't do it, then it's not going to get done. So it's actually just easier if I do it. And I think that's true for a lot of people. But that in itself is kind of like a whole other can of worms that we can open, a whole other episode on conveying what you want and getting people to act upon it, and them seeing it, I think, is the key thing. But for this purpose, if you can delegate, share the ownership. If you can't, then I'll make a mental note to do a whole episode on that and ways you can work on that. And yeah, that's a whole other episode. Back to the anxiety. So for many of us, the anxiety is at its highest, highest, most heightened, before we leave. So it's the week before, the night before, the morning of the journey. Then when you arrive at the airport, maybe when you've checked your bags in or you've got to the destination, you breathe a bit of a sigh of relief and then you feel like yourself again. And then this can really cause confusion. And I don't think this is spoken about enough, because you've had this busyness, hectic, chaotic run up to the holiday, you've probably bitten people's heads off or shouted internally and felt really stressed. But you get there and you're like, oh, I feel all right now. And then that's when you might think, oh, why did I get myself into such a state? Like, I'm fine now. And then for the majority of the holiday, you settle back into it. But then for a lot of people, you notice before you leave, those feelings start to come back up again. So, why does the build up often feel worse than the holiday itself? So, for many people, the anxiety is at its highest before they leave. So, the week before, the night before, the morning of the journey. But then they arrive, they put the bags down, they settle into the accommodation, and they begin to feel more like themselves again. And that can be quite confusing because you might think, well, why did I get myself so stressed? I feel okay now. But before you leave, everything still feels unfinished. There are a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of uncertainty, and there are lots of things that can't be completely controlled. And if things are out of control and our mind can't regain control, then it's going to signal to our nervous system to be on high alert. Because when we're going on a holiday, we don't know if there's going to be delays. We don't know how tired everybody's going to be. You don't know whether the accommodation will be as you expected. Don't know if we're trying to mitigate forgetting something or somebody becoming unwell. And an anxious, overloaded mind doesn't particularly enjoy an unfinished story. So, as I was saying, it likes to know exactly what's going to happen. It wants reassurance that everything is going to be okay. It wants to remove every possible risk before you leave. So, your brain is going to go into hypervigilant mode. It will start checking, and that's when you're going back, checking the passports, checking the booking, checking the weather, maybe checking another weather app in case the first one wasn't accurate. You check the route to the airport, you double check the taxi, and you mentally rehearse the journey and you imagine how you would respond to the different problems. And as we know, if you're a regular listener of this podcast, your mind doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality. So as soon as you are mentally rehearsing what could go wrong, as soon as you're planning for every eventuality, your mind doesn't know that it's not happening right here, right now. Your body begins to produce your stress hormones, the cortisol, the adrenaline, and on top of an already stressed mind doing all the physical things, you're now adding to it as well, which is why we feel so triggered and stressed, not just mentally, but physically as well. And your mind is telling you, like, we need to do this. Like, I'm helping you, we're preparing. And it genuinely believes that it is. But what is happening, and is often the case with anxiety, it's got misconstrued. It's become overprotective because there's a difference, an important difference between practical preparation and repeatedly rehearsing danger and what could go wrong. Because practical preparation has an end. Okay, I'll check the passports, I've got the insurance documents, I know the dogs are booked into the kennels, the bags are packed, and we know those tasks are complete. But anxiety doesn't always recognize when work is finished. It will keep searching for something else because it believes that if it thinks for long enough, it might actually create some complete certainty, which, if that is speaking to you, listen to last week's episode about the detective in your mind because that explains that concept in even more detail. But often complete certainty doesn't exist. So instead of helping you feel more prepared, all that mental checking can actually begin to convince your body that something dangerous is approaching. And your nervous system receives this message and it goes, oh, okay, well, this must be a threat. Look how much attention we're giving it. Because wherever attention goes, energy flows. Your heart begins racing, you feel unsettled in your stomach, perhaps you're not sleeping, you feel snappy, irritated, and you find it hard to focus on anything else. And then we interpret those physical sensations as evidence that we're not coping, but really it's your body saying we're overloaded, we're carrying too much, as opposed to this isn't safe, we shouldn't go, we can't travel. And this is when we can become frightened by our own feelings of overwhelm and anxiety, because travel overwhelm can also become tangled up with the fear of how you might feel. Perhaps you've experienced panic or anxiety when traveling before. So now, as this trip approaches, your mind starts to monitor you. Am I feeling anxious yet? Does my stomach feel odd? What if I panic when I get to the airport? What if I can't calm myself down? What if I ruin the holiday? You're no longer anticipating just the journey. You're anticipating the emotional response of the journey. And the more closely you monitor yourself, the more significant every physical sensation begins to feel. It's called the spotlight effect. You are shining the spotlight on the things that you are thinking about the most. And then you notice those physical sensations and you're instantly on them. Like you feel a kind of a little flutter in your belly. Like, what if I become ill? You know, when you're tired, it comes out as, what if I can't cope? And then a moment of doubt becomes, what if I don't want to go? The anxiety becomes the evidence. I feel frightened. So there must be something to fear. But a feeling is not always a warning. Sometimes it is the anticipation, sometimes it's the exhaustion, sometimes it's the memory of a previous experience, and sometimes it's the discomfort of not being in control. And I'd say those latter two are the biggest factors. But I think the key thing is you don't need to feel completely calm before leaving in order to have a calm trip. You can feel anxious on the morning of the journey and settle in when you arrive. You can have a difficult hour without having a difficult holiday. You can feel unsettled and still be safe. And you can still be capable even while your body is experiencing anxiety. And I think those points are really important to refer and remind ourselves of, because when we're in the midst of overwhelm anxiety, we're not thinking logically, we're not in the logical part of our brain, we're making it mean something, but it doesn't have to always mean what we're telling ourselves. We can bring ourselves back to the present moment. And then also, when it comes to holidays and the overwhelm, and another factor that adds into the overwhelm is the pressure to create the perfect holiday. Hands up, who can relate to this? My hand is in the air. And it's often an unspoken pressure. And I'm going to add in here, I think, more so when your children get older, because in your mind you're thinking, yeah, but they're not going to want to come on holiday with me for much longer. I mean, I'm hoping mine do, especially if I offer to pay. Like, I know you're 25, but will you still come with me? Like, my eldest is going to be 18 this year, and in my head I'm thinking, like, that's it, you shouldn't want to come away with me again. So there's a lot of pressure to, quote unquote, make memories and have this amazing time. And obviously holidays are expensive. We've saved for them. We take months to plan them. And, maybe you don't go very often. Maybe it's every other year or something. So it starts to feel really, really important that everybody has to enjoy themselves. You want the children to make memories. You want your partner to relax. You want to see the places you've researched. In my case, the TikTok food places. I'm terrible for that. Wherever we go, I hope the kids will be like, oh, did you see this place on TikTok? And 9 times out of 10, they're not worth the hype, let me tell you. But I'm just a sucker for a food influencer. I'm a food influencer's like dream, honestly. So yeah, maybe there's places you've researched on TikTok that you want to go and see. And you just don't want anybody to be disappointed, because suddenly you're not only just responsible for the holiday and organising it, you're now responsible for everybody's enjoyment of it too. So if somebody is tired, bored, hungry, you feel as though you need to fix it for them. If the weather changes, you feel like, right, I've got to make an alternative plan. If somebody doesn't enjoy an activity, you're wondering if you made the wrong decision. You make it about you. If something doesn't run smoothly, you feel as though you should have anticipated it. But a family holiday involves other human beings, and people become tired. Children complain. Teenagers can still be teenagers in a foreign country if there's no Wi-Fi. Plans change. Restaurants are full. The weather can be unpredictable. The TikTok destination for the food item was shit. And you just spent £10 on a hot chocolate that was actually disgusting, which is what I did at Christmas. So disappointing. And none of that means that the holiday has failed. A good holiday isn't dictated by whether nothing goes wrong or everybody remained delighted every single minute of the day and nobody grumbled or moaned or had a cross word because you took a wrong turning in the car and didn't read the sat nav properly. We can't have these unrealistic standards, and I think so many of us do. We set the bar so high in life in general, but even more so when it comes to holidays because of all the added factors we've mentioned. But holidays create tiredness. We get tired, we get jet lagged, we get exhausted, and that can result in arguments and tension. That's okay. Sometimes things result in a change of plans, moments of anxiety. That's okay. And again, with teenagers, sometimes they can be more interested in the phone than the view that you've brought them to see. It could mean that you ended up just getting snacks from the supermarket because nobody could agree on a restaurant and you got cross and you said, well, then we're not going to eat here or anywhere. Let's just go get some snacks, which I've totally not done before. And you don't have to earn this holiday by running yourself into the ground before you leave. Like, exhaustion isn't a benchmark of success. You don't have to make the house look as though nobody has ever lived in it. Now, when I wrote that in my notes, I chuckled to myself because, again, hands up, who goes away and has to make sure the house is spotlessly tidy? I don't. I do it every time. It's become some like obsessive compulsion where before I leave the house, like the toilets have to be bleached and everything, the bathrooms have to be clean. Like, what if somebody breaks in? They were like, oh, we won't take anything from this house because her toilet was so spotlessly clean. I could smell the bleach when I opened the lid. Or wow, that bathroom is so shiny. Let's turn around and walk out. I don't know why I do it. Like everything has to be so perfect. It's actually obsessional. I don't know why. I think it's because, again, I'm sure many of you listening agree, I like that feeling of freshness when I come back. I like to walk into a clean home. I like things to be neat and tidy. I like to have fresh bedding. And I like to just be able to come in, sit down, and then tackle the mountains of washing that comes with coming back from being on holiday. You don't have to pack for every possible scenario. You don't need to have the flawless itinerary, and you don't have to accept responsibility for every capable person traveling with you. Emphasis on the word capable. There may be things that only you can do, but there will also be things that can be shared, simplified, or left undone. And that's not about lowering your standards. It's about saying what's within my remit to control, what isn't, what's humanly possible versus what is actually going to continue to burn me out and make me resent this bloody holiday. It's not about getting to the airport and every task being completed. I mean, obviously, there are some tasks that need to be completed, passports, tickets, money, the drill. But if you didn't bleach the toilets, that's fine. The world's not going to end. If you didn't manage to put fresh bedding on, that's okay. You can still enjoy the holiday. It's really the aim of the game is getting to the destination, the airport, the port, wherever you're going from, leaving the house with the essentials, like we said, tickets, passport, money, everybody present and correct. We don't want to do it home alone. Make sure everybody's there. But having a little bit of energy for yourself so you're not literally leaving a frazzled mess. And for many high functioning women, we've become incredibly good at anticipating problems. We have an innate skill of noticing what needs doing before anybody else does. You think ahead, you prepare, you make sure everybody has what they need. And these qualities may be part of what makes you reliable, capable, and good at caring for other people, but they can also leave you feeling as though you're never allowed to fully switch off. And once people become used to you noticing everything, they may stop noticing things for themselves. They just assume you have it covered. And I think this is a real kind of downside to like this high functioning anxiety and high functioning overwhelm. Is because you look calm doing it, because you've nailed it. You are that metaphorical swan. You're gliding on the surface, but your feet are frantically paddling underneath, and people just think, "Oh, she's okay. She's got it all together. She's organised." This isn't necessarily because they don't care, but because the family system has learnt that you will step in, you will remember, you will fix it, and you probably will. 99.99% sure you will. But every time you automatically rescue everybody from the consequences of not thinking ahead, it reinforces the belief that you are really responsible for everything. So we learn through repetition, and there's a term called confirmation bias, which will actually look out for information to back up a belief. So you'll see somebody else being incompetent. You notice everything getting left to you. So your brain's like, well, yeah, this is what we need to do. This is familiar. Familiarity equals safety. And it just becomes a default setting. And it gives you that feeling, that evidence, and become even more convinced that everything depends upon you. And breaking that cycle can feel really uncomfortable. As we speak about a lot here, change feels uncomfortable. We don't like change. It makes us feel vulnerable, on edge. It keeps our subconscious scanning for danger. And I think also for a lot of mums, that sometimes it's about if I relinquish some of the responsibility, then I have to accept that things may be done differently or might go differently. You know, the person might pack later than you would have done. They might not research as much as you would have. They didn't watch the 10 TikTok videos on that one particular restaurant. They might forget something, but forgetting something isn't always a disaster. Caveat that, of course, yes, with travel, there are some things that would be disastrous should you forget them. So I'm not saying don't do your due diligence. I can't speak due diligence. Do your checks, but within a remit, I think is what we're saying here. Like, some things, if we forget them, can be inconvenient. Some things can be replaced, and sometimes, we can buy them when we get there. Or perhaps the person who forgot it could solve the problem themselves. Not every problem has to become your emergency. So, how can we reduce the mental load? What can we begin to change? And the first step is to make the invisible visible. So, you're probably already doing this, like write everything down that's currently in your head. And I don't mean necessarily as a to do list, but sometimes just as a brain dump, because we are carrying so much in our heads, they are full. By just writing everything out, it seems a bit like, well, I've got lists, or, yeah, I don't have time to do that. But genuinely, take a piece of paper and a pen and just write everything out. It's like a mental reset, and it just clears some of that noise out. So you can then reassess, okay, what's my next step? Can I delegate? It just gives you a bit of breathing space. Because actually, also, as well, what you find there is when tasks are visible, you can decide whether they genuinely belong to you. And often, when you write stuff down, it might not seem as much or as many things as there were when it was swirling around in your head. And then you could look at these things logically and ask yourself, what can only I do? What could somebody else fully own? What is genuinely essential? What am I doing because I'm trying to prevent every possible inconvenience? And there's a difference between we need our passports and I need to pack for every imaginable weather condition. There is a difference between the pets need to be cared for and I must leave the house absolutely spotless, bleach the toilets, mop the floors as I'm leaving the house. There's a difference between being prepared and trying to eliminate every possible disaster. And then next, it's time to think about ownership rather than help. Instead of asking, can you help me with the holiday? Give somebody I can't speak. Give somebody a complete area of responsibility. So they arrange the parking, they arrange the pet care, or they pack their own belongings, they check what they need, they take responsibility for remembering it. And then, as difficult as it may feel, and as hard as it often is, it's trying not to manage from the sidelines. Because if you continue reminding, supervising, checking, your mind truly never releases it. It's still yours. And you can also decide in advance what good enough looks like. The bags might not be perfectly organized. Although, side note here, one thing I used to do, might be obvious to other people, but when the kids were little, going away was just so full on. So my children, there's just 5 years between the three of them. So when they were little, it was, yeah, a lot to go on holiday. And an idea I came up with, which I'm sure the people have come up with before, I didn't invent this, but it made a big difference to me. So I'll share it just in case anybody listening has young kids. And it might sound contradictory because this is quite a bit of work, given me saying we need to try and offload things. But this was something that, yes, created a little bit of work in the run up to the holiday, but it mitigated so much work on holiday. So with three little kids, mornings were always chaotic, and I used to hate thinking about like what are they going to wear. So I would get each child's outfit, the whole outfit, so shorts, t-shirt, dress, whatever, underwear, socks, hairband, whatever they needed, the full outfit, and then I would fold it up and I would put it into clear, largish, depending on how old they were at the time, sandwich bags, and then I would label it. Yep, I would label it with the child's name and the day of the week, and then I would put it in the case, and I would do that for day and evening outfits. And then I would do one for each day of the holiday, and then I would do a couple of spare outfits as well. And I do that for each of the children. Now that might sound really neurotic, but oh my gosh, it made the biggest difference, because when you're in a hotel room or a villa and you've got three little kids running around and trying to get them all dressed, just to be able to, so when I got there, I would unpack them from the case, but I would put the bag still in the drawers and just stack them up. So each child had a drawer stacked with outfits, and I would just in the morning grab the bag and I would just pop it on the child. And it was so much easier. There was no, oh, what's this person wearing? What top goes with those shorts? It was like bam, 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 done. And if there were things that could be creased, I would hang out maybe the dresses up in the wardrobe. But to be quite honest, I was more concerned with ease and less stressed than creased clothes. And little clothes don't really crease anyway, do they? So anyway, that is what I used to do, and it just made things so much easier. So yes, it was a lot of prep and a lot of bags. Probably not the most eco-friendly of solutions. Maybe they're reusable bags you can get nowadays, but it saved so much stress. And I did that right up until they were quite old. Now they're teenagers. I don't do that. They can pack their own bags and they can be responsible for their own things. I'll just remind them of stuff, which makes holidays a lot less stressful now, I have to say. But yeah, when they were little, that was definitely something that I found super useful. So it's about looking at what's good enough, not about dropping your standards, but just accepting you're doing the very best you can and nobody can ask for any more than that. And it's creating that space for real life. It's taking the pressure off. Nothing is perfect. We cannot be perfect. So when your mind starts to try and manage the whole trip at once, bring it back to the next step. So do some somatic work, somatic shake, breath work. You don't need to mentally complete the airport, the flight, the transfer, the check in, the entire holiday while you are still sitting at home. You only need to deal with what is in front of you at that time. So finish packing, then get dressed, then lock the door. Maybe you've bleached the toilet. Travel to the airport, check in, find the gate. One step at a time. And then it's about moving from control to self trust. And this is a big thing I work on with my clients, and it's trusting yourself. Travel overwhelm is often fueled by the belief that control is what keeps you safe. So it's anxiety saying to you, I need to remember absolutely everything. Whereas self trust says, if something is forgotten, we will find a solution. Anxiety says to you, I need to know exactly how the journey will go, whereas self trust says I can respond to each part of the journey as it happens. Anxiety says I must make sure everybody is happy, whereas self trust says other people are allowed to have their own feelings. Self trust says teenagers are teenagers. Anxiety says I can't relax because something might go wrong, whereas self trust would say to you, I don't need to prevent every problem in order to cope with one. Anxiety says to you, I don't have to hold everything together. Self trust says, I'm allowed to let other people carry their share. And like I've been saying to you, this is not about being careless. This is not about dropping your standards. It's about recognizing that being responsible is not the same as being responsible for everything. It's allowing yourself to prepare without punishing yourself with the endless preparation. And it's trusting that you can handle an imperfect moment without ruining the whole experience. And do some visualization. Our minds are so good at preempting what might go wrong that we spend our whole time visualizing the worst. Utilize the skill, the knowledge that your mind doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality by thinking about how would I like it to go. I love to do a scripting letter around holidays and write out about the holiday. So write the letter in the present tense as if it's happened. So we went on this amazing holiday to such and such. It was wonderful. We had the best time. The weather was gorgeous, da 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 da. And read that through, because if you can convince your mind of disaster, you can convince your mind that you can have an incredible time as well. So write it as a scripting letter, close your eyes, visualize it. Anything you can do to counteract those anxious thoughts with what if it went well? What if we had the best time? What if that TikTok restaurant was a 10 out of 10 and as amazing as the as the influence suggested it would be? So I want to just wrap this episode up here because it has gone on for so long. I didn't realize how passionate I felt about this topic. I've gone so far off of my notes, but I really, really hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope it has resonated, and there are definitely some topics from this episode that would be further episodes that we could dive deeper into, so I have made some mental notes of those. But if you're listening to this and you're going on holiday and you're resonating, relating to everything that I've said, just give yourself a break. Give yourself permission to delegate, to offload. And remember, you are allowed to let capable people take responsibility for themselves. You are allowed to forget something, just not your passport, and you can find a solution later. You are allowed to feel nervous and still look forward to something. You are allowed to enjoy the holiday without first feeling like you need to earn it. And maybe it's just knowing that I have done enough and I don't need to hold everything together. Because sometimes it's not that you're bad at relaxing, you've just simply been given far too much to remember and you are burnt out. So, I really, really hope you have enjoyed this very long episode and that you got to the end. If you have, please like this episode. If you have liked it, share, leave a review. It really helps me to get the podcast out to even more people. And if you want to connect with me, all the details are in the show notes below. So I hope you have an amazing week, and I'm off now to plan for my trip away, get the bleach out to bleach the toilets, remember the passports, and I will speak to you all again soon. Take care.